So when I was younger, I had a friend of mine who was a few years older than me. Actually, he was like 6 years older than me. But it was a good friend of mine from church, and our moms were good friends, and we goofed around a whole lot. We had, we were like brothers. We kind of had nicknames for each other. We picked on each other. But for some reason, he always called me Crouton Head. Okay, now like crouton, like the square, hard pieces of bread in a salad. I don't know where this came from or why this was the nickname that he gave me. But looking back on pictures of me as a child, actually I was looking at one yesterday compared to my son Liam, and boy, man, I had a crouton head. I had a big old square looking. I just had a big head. I was real skinny. And so, I never really thought that it kind of bothered with me or stuck with me at all. But sometimes things like that can define you. And I remember kind of being self-conscious for a while about hat sizes. What size hat I wore kind of defined how big of a crouton head I had. And for some of you, you don't know this, but I had dreadlocks for 14 years. And when I had dreadlocks and they were down to my waist, I had to wear a hat size that was 7 5/8, which is huge. If I were to put that hat on right now, like it would just sit on my head like a bowl. Now that my hair's cut off, I'm back down to like a 7 1/4 or something like that. But sometimes things that we hear in our childhood, things that we hear repeated over and over, we tend to kind of latch onto those things and let them define us. And a lot of times it's not in a healthy way. Well, today we're going to join Chris for part 2 of our series, The Journey is the Destination. And we're going to kind of walk through some of that thing about the things in our lives, the words, the names that kind of define us and how we can overcome those things. So why don't we join Chris right now for part 2 of our series, The Journey is the Destination.
So a little while back in my life and for our family, we lived in Tanzania in East Africa, kind of this third world, fourth world country, really poor. There were some things that happened there that were great. Won't bore you with all the details. One of my favorite things there, it's not really a favorite thing, but it turned out to be, anyway, is that often people didn't have a lot of clothes there to wear. They had 1 or 2 garments that they wore every day. That's why I say it's not one of my favorite things, because that just sounds mean. But often you'd see the guy in the red shirt. That's how you would identify him, because he probably wore the red shirt yesterday. He'll probably wear it tomorrow, next week, next month. It's how you knew who the guy was until you learned the people and learned their names. We had a guy who was in our community. Ended up as part of our church, and he came in, he wore the same shirt all the time, and he probably didn't read any English, and it was a maternity shirt that said baby on board, had an arrow pointing toward where the baby is supposed to be. It's just funny. It's just not making fun, okay, maybe making fun a little, just funny. And we would always, baby on board guy, until we learned his name and got to know him. Like for us, that's what defined him or identified him. It was, baby on board guy. Where we want to start today is on that subject. What defines? How do you define someone, or what defines you? Obviously, the shirt's just a sad way to start, but here's where we go. When you define something, if we were to identify what that is, when you define something, it means you describe clearly and exactly what something is. If you define it, you say, this is exactly what it is. You defined it. That's really not our topic, is how you define something. Today, it's how something defines you. When something defines you, here's what we say. It is how something defines you is experiences, environments, roles, culture, and feelings that take root in your life. Let me do a little disclaimer first. Experiences, environments, roles, culture, and feelings do not define you, but sometimes they do define you. Actually, they don't define you. It's when they take root in your life that it defines you. Does that make sense to you? 2 people can have the same experience. One of them worked through that and the other let it take root in their life, they have very different outcomes. We know that. Some people come from the same home and experience those very different outcomes, and one allowed it to take root in their life. Doesn't mean it wasn't difficult for both. A good example is I was with a friend talking about experiences and environments. I was with a friend this last week, and we were both talking about kids, brothers who've been taken from really difficult situations and adopted into better homes. And both of these sets of brothers had experienced unthinkable, disgusting, make you throw up kind of things probably before they're 3 or 4 years old and before they were adopted. And you can see how those things are going to affect anybody's life. It would be silly not to say they do. But you know what's crazy is it doesn't mean those things have to take root in your life. But if you're not careful, those things will define the rest of your life. You'll be spinning out of control, and some of us have done that. Some of us have had experiences or environments in our life that have affected us so deeply, and they continue to affect us. They've taken root in our lives. Make sense? They become definers in our lives. For some people, it's roles. Some people, our roles change. You go from single to dating somebody, and that's a role change. Or you may go from dating somebody to married, or married. You may go from all of that, now I have kids, I'm a parent, and those roles all change. Sometimes those roles become what define us. They become our identifiers. We lose our own identity, and my identity is a we instead of a me. You know what I mean? You see that happen sometimes. Sometimes as a parent, I'll say this one and then I'll duck a little bit. Sometimes as a parent, we become so intensely focused on being a parent, a mom or a dad, that we lose a big piece of our identity, and we're doing it for the sake of something good, but it takes root in our life to the point that becomes our identity. Sometimes I hear people say, my kids are my everything. And I have a feeling when people say that, they're not trying to say something out of balance, but it always scares me a little bit, because my kids aren't my everything. My kids are a lot of things. They're a lot of good things. The people that are in my life, my wife is not my everything. She's my amazing thing God brought into my life. I'm not sure I should call her a thing, but she's the amazing part of my life that God has brought. But listen, she is not who I am. Husband is not my identity. It is my title. It's my role. It just can't be everything. When I do that, there's so much risk. I also put so much weight on the other people that it's really unhealthy. Or for a lot of people, the last one of those, the last two, culture becomes a big defining part. However you grow up, the culture around you can affect you so much, and we often become how culture views masculinity, how culture views femininity, how culture views Christianity, how culture views whatever, and often it defines us. It takes root in us, and it actually begins to become part of our identity. The last piece of that says feelings, and often culture leads to feelings, that our feelings define us. Listen, feelings are real, and we all have them. And when people say, this is how I feel, I don't think that's something supposed to be. We don't judge feelings. Feelings aren't right or wrong, good or bad, up or down, left or right. Feelings are just information. They're just data. They tell you something is going on inside. Feelings shouldn't be where we stop. It should be where we start. It's if you've ever heard a therapist saying, how does that make you feel? And you're like, I hate that stuff. I hate that touchy-feely stuff. Well, what they're saying is the feelings aren't the bottom line if we could understand why that's going on. The feelings give us data. The data helps us dig inside. Well, for a lot of people today, our feelings are determining our identity. This is how I feel, so this is who I am. Can I just say this? Feelings are fickle. They are not trustworthy. Feelings float with time. Feelings are affected by culture and by environment and by roles and by experiences. That feelings are real. They just can't be the basis of our identity. And when they become the basis of our identity, they take root in our lives, and we are very susceptible to making horrible, difficult, painful, difficult outcome decisions. So where we want to land today is to begin to understand this. Last week we started a series called The Journey is the Destination. We're basing it on Scripture and also around this book written. Jeremy started our first part last week. He wrote this book by the same name. If you don't have that, by the way, and you're distant from us, we've got them here on our property. If you're far away, you can get those anywhere you get electronic media, whether that's Amazon or whatever your favorite source of that. The purpose of the first 5 chapters he got us through last week and gave us a jump start, and it pretty much says for a lot of people the way they see Christian life, following Jesus. Spirituality is to say we believe in something. We reach a point where we say, yes, I believe. And then from that point forward, we try to behave. We do the things we're supposed to do. I believe. Now I do the right things. I do the thou shalts. I try not to do the thou shalt nots. And I hang on till I die. And then someday there's heaven. Woohoo! And it's going to be great. So I believe, hang on, celebrate. And his point was that that's not the way God intended life to be. He intended the breathing in and out, going to sleep, waking up, doing life, sun up, sun down, life that you're experiencing right now to be meaningful, not to just be monotonous. He intended it for it to be purposeful and beneficial and enjoyable and a reason to wake up in the morning. And often the reason we don't feel that is we're lost in this monotony of, I believe, now I've got to behave until something good happens someday. And that's what we're trying to talk about. And what we're going to say are there's these 5 gears, we're referring to them as, and these 5 gears, when they mesh together, they produce the life you want. The life you'll enjoy. They produce the life we're meant to have. The first one of these gears that we're talking about this week, it'll be chapter 6 in that book, is called Pursue Identity. All the gears start with the word pursue. Pursue identity. What that means is living the true view of yourself. It's living out the identity you're supposed to have. When we get to this subject, I thought the best place to look is the first people who really dealt with identity issues, and maybe the best examples that I could find. If you went all the way back to Genesis 4, right at the beginning of the Bible, the first verse in Genesis 4 says, Adam and Eve, that was the first 2, remember? And that Adam saw Eve and he was like, ha ha ha! That's the French. I speak French, and that's what I can go with. And as a result of that, the next verse says that there were 2 offspring, Abel and Cain, or Cain and Abel, as a result. Verse 2 says this, when they grew up, that's Cain and Abel, Abel became a shepherd, while Cain cultivated the ground, a farmer and a shepherd. When it was time for harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Here's the designation in that, some of his crops. Like Cain was like, here you go. Abel, it says, also brought a gift, and the way it is discussed very differently, he brought the best portions of the firstborn lambs of his flock. It's like, here you go, and the other one's like, yes, here's the best. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift, and this made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected, because that's how you look after you've been angry, is dejected. This is such a confusing little passage at first read, because what it sounds like is God doesn't like vegetables, which that would be okay with me, by the way. I like meat over vegetables, and that was God giving a thumbs up for me to be that way. It's not what it is. It's not saying that Abel or that Cain just didn't bring, I hate potatoes. You bring potatoes? You bringing me potatoes? It's not what it's saying. He's not saying be more like your brother, bring me lamb. It's not what he's saying. There's something way below, and I think you can probably already sense that. God wasn't rejecting Cain. He was rejecting Cain's offering, or maybe below that surface, he's rejecting something that Cain did to bring his offering. There's something more going on. Cain's issue wasn't proper sacrifice etiquette. Like, Abel stood on one foot with his hand in the air and said the magic words and sprinkled some dust. It's not that. He wasn't saying, you suck at bringing offerings. He wasn't saying that. He's saying there's some details you didn't take care of, and I'm not mad over the details. I'm mad over something bigger than that. It was about whether he trusted that God knew and wanted what was best for him. Here was the issue. That Abel did exactly what God said because he assumed that if God said it, there was a reason, and if there was a reason, his trust in God was enough to get him to do it. Let me just slow down on that one. He did exactly what God did because he trusted that God wanted what was best for him, and if God asked him to do it, there must be a reason to do it that way. Cain said, he's asked me to do it, so here. That's enough. I did what I have to do. By the way, we all live in this world today where one of us we get so caught up in the what we're doing that we forget the why we're doing it piece. Well, as a result of all of this, the next verse, God goes to Cain. I don't know why God would do that. If it were me, I would have said, I've said all I need to say, you go along. But he didn't. Why are you so angry, the Lord asked Cain. Why do you look so dejected? You'll be accepted if you do what is right. He goes to him and says, listen, this isn't the end. I haven't kicked you out. You're not off the island. You're not out of here. I'm not done with you. All I want you to do is just do the things you know you should do. I'm not rejecting you. I've rejected your response to what I've asked you to do. And listen, all I want you to do, I'm here for you. I'm with you. I want what's best for you. All I want you to do is do it right. That seems pretty reasonable. By the way, if I were God, that seems like a huge beyond the call of duty kind of thing. Then he gives them this little warning, and if you don't like warnings, I mean, for some of us, hearing somebody say, if you do that, this is what's going to happen, kind of pushes all our buttons. I think it did with Cain, but listen to the words. They're super important for us. He said, but if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Now, what he could have said is, if you don't do what I tell you, don't make me take my belt off, boy. Don't make me come back there. Don't make me pull this car over, right? It's not what he said at all. He said, but if you refuse to do what's right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it to be its master. He's saying, when you don't take me as important as I should be in your life, in other words, if you won't accept my control in your life, something's going to control your life. If you don't accept my defining of your life, something's going to define your life. But be careful, because what defines your life will control you someday. And what controls you will make it. That'll become your identity, and your identity will determine your outcomes. He gives them this brilliant thing. I mean, you kind of got to trust somebody to listen to it. But he's just saying, I'm telling you, I'm trying to save you from worse days ahead. I'm trying to save you from pain. I'm trying to save you from hurt. I'm trying to save you from regret. And I'm just telling you, if you won't let me have control in your life, control's the deal, right? If you won't let me have control, something's going to control you. You think you're going to control yourself, something will control you. And I'm just telling you, if you don't subdue this now, it will control you later. And as a result, you're going to do things you're really going to regret. Man, that seems so smart. It seems so smart when it's saying it to somebody else, especially. I'm just watching from a distance going, listen to that, dude. Hey, OG advice. Oh, God, is what I'm talking about. OG advice, do that. Well, he didn't. Go 2 verses longer. One day, Cain suggested to his brother, let's go out into the fields. And while they were in the fields, obviously, this anger and stuff had taken root in his life. And Cain attacked his brother Abel, and he killed him. Here's the bottom line. Cain's life was being defined by the rejection he felt that God had dealt him. If you had talked to him, he would have said, this isn't my fault. God did it. It's God's fault. He's the one who rejected me. Now, if you were listening, you would say, yeah, well, hey, God didn't reject you. As a matter of fact, he said, just do what I ask you to do. Man, I'm with you. I'm for you. But listen, a lot of us have done the same thing. Well, God's unpleasable. Well, God, and it's not my fault, it's not my fault. When God has been all along saying, I just know what's best for you. Trust me. But here's the deal. Trust me that you build your identity in me, that you relinquish control, and trust me because everything I ask you to do is for your best, not for me. I'm not saying do what you do because of me. I'm saying do what you do because I care for you and I know what's best, but you will have to relinquish control and trust me. Brilliant. So we see what defined him was his unwillingness to follow God. I have to control, I have to do it my way. Can I ask you, what defines you? It sounds so easy. It is really hard to know what defines you. There's a phrase we use, we say it's becoming nose blind. Sometimes we don't know what it is inside of us that defines us. Sometimes it's not easy to see. Sometimes people from outside can see it better than we can on the inside. Sometimes I don't want to believe what it is that's defining me. Well, I don't know all the ways to figure out what defines you, but one of the things I've recognized in my life, one of the ways to define what defines you is when it's taken away, you notice the response. When you start to lose a little bit of that, you notice the response. I'll give you a couple of examples. I had a friend a while back who's a vocalist, a singer, made their living being on stages, everybody clapping, woo, you're amazing, you're so talented, that meant so much to me, I remember seeing you win, those kind of things. If you had asked them, they would say, listen, singer is not who I am, it's just what I do. I'm glad I get to do it, it's just a gift from God. They went through a time when they had some issues with their vocal cords, and they were substantial. As a matter of fact, they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, I don't know that you'll ever get some of the use back, but here's what you need to do right now. For the next 6 months, I need you not to sing. Period. Zero. Don't practice, don't go on stage, and I need you to reduce your talking to absolute minimums. I need you at all costs, and then we'll go back and see, is it ever going to be regained? Are you ever going to be able to do it again? Well, after a couple of months of that, I remember talking to them and them saying, I never realized how big a part of my life that was. Some of that makes sense. Of course, that's what you've always done. But as they began to talk, they began to share how much of the affirmation from me doing that generated my life. In other words, how much it defined me, that I wasn't a person who sang, I was a singer. You see what I mean? When they missed it, they began to recognize, oh my gosh, so much of my belief about me, like I don't feel like I'm a very valuable person now that I'm not doing that. And that's how you know it's becoming a definer in your life. It's part of your identity. Make sense? It's easy when we're talking about them. Somebody else might do it this way. It's when, as a parent, you put all of your life into your kids and they need you so much, especially when kids start. They need you for everything. That's a two-way street here. Because part of you, as your kids grow up, you just rejoice that you're not potty training or buying diapers anymore. I mean, it's like that may be the biggest blessing of your life. But there's this other part as they keep getting older, and it doesn't happen to everyone. But for some of us as parents, when we don't feel as needed, when they become more independent, as they get older and bigger and more independent, that they don't need us, they don't ask for us, they don't listen to us. And often there's natural breaking points in that, but often there's this feeling that I'm not as valuable as I was because I'm not needed the same way, that my value is decreased. And lots of people deal with depression and deal with issues. It's just a sign. It's not shooting at you if that's you. Not trying, because it probably means you've invested so much in trying to be a great parent. It's not picking at you. It's just saying that sometimes, hey, parent is not who you are. Parent is the role you've been given, but it can't be your identity. It can't be your everything. I know for some of you, I'm glad you're watching this on camera because you're like, hey, don't make me come over there. I know. I'm just saying, trust me, in my world, that has been a piece of my life to recognize. Or maybe you've invested so much in training your kids and teaching them and all the things that were good, and over the course of time, they veered away. And for some of you watching this right now, this is deep, deep hurt in your life. Like I am, don't go there. You're about to touch the third rail. You're about to get shot. Don't do that. And it's a painful piece of your life. And there's part of you that are feeling, I'm a lesser person because my kids haven't followed what I've taught. I thought I did everything I could. I must have been a bad parent. I must have done it wrong. Can I just say this couple things to you and then we'll go. One is that, listen, just because your kids haven't bought everything you taught doesn't mean you didn't teach them the right thing. It doesn't mean you weren't a good parent. I'll just say this. Jesus chose 12 that followed him every day. Jesus, just pick this up. Jesus, Savior of the world, Creator of the universe, the Messiah, flawless, faultless, sinless, Jesus, that guy. One of the 12 that walked with him every day abandoned him, denied, rejected, sold him out. I'm just saying, even with Jesus, people around him made choices that weren't in keeping with what he taught. It wasn't because he wasn't a good enough Jesus. And listen, as a parent, you could have done better. We all could. But you may have invested your life and your kids have veered. Can I just say this? That is not a direct reflection on you. Doesn't mean your time was wasted. It doesn't mean you failed. They have free choices. Every book has chapters, and if in this chapter that's where they are, it doesn't necessarily reflect on your value. But I'll just tell you this, many of us become so defined by being a parent that when our kids leave, when they veer, when we empty nest, when whatever, we find ourselves going, I'm not sure I have a reason to be here anymore. Can I just tell you, it means that they have defined you. You've built more identity in them than you should. And that's not, it's okay because it's not the end of the story. You can adjust, but just understand it as that. For some people, it's when We has become who you are. You've become a we, not a me. Some of you who are single are going, I wish I had this problem, and I get that because your loneliness is large. But often we can become so much that we lose a piece of my me because we're so we. And as a result, a loved one passes away, and that is obviously devastating no matter what. But some people live through that and find wholeness. But some people feel like I'm a half a person the rest of my life, and you're not. You're just not. But maybe it's a sign that you become so defined by the person you're with that you've lost your identity, and your identity can't come from somebody else, or you'll never be fully healthy. For some people, it's my identity or my defining is that I've always been, there's been beauty, there's been attractiveness, there's been success, I've always been good at things. When I walked in the room, people noticed, and over the course of time, sometimes they say beauty fades. I don't really believe that. In our house, we've always said that pretty fades, beauty lasts. Pretty is how you look, beauty is who you are, so beauty doesn't fade. But one of the ugly realities is sometimes with the passage of turning that calendar over and over as time goes by, that sometimes our attractiveness, at least viewed from people far away, may not be noticed as much, and all of a sudden you feel like I'm not sure where my value is. It maybe just mean part of your defining. It's one of the scariest things when you watch people become so absorbed in appearance. You just go, you're letting that define you. Please don't do that. Not because it's wrong and Jesus is going to hate you, because it's going to hurt you. And that's what God doesn't want for us. All of those things, just to say, I had a friend who had some things happen physically, and as a result, they told him he wouldn't be able to do his job. And I just remember the day they told him, you're going to have to apply for disability. And I remember his statement, I'm not disabled. And that thought of being disabled for someone who has always been so able, it was such a defining factor. And he had to work through that process of saying that who I am is not my ability to do. That who I am is who I am. The ability to do just comes with it. And so disabled, what a horrible name for anything anyway, but disabled won't define me. That I'm still a whole person, I'm still a valuable person. And he's played that out, but you can see what I mean. Who identifies me is a big question. It's not what you do, it's who you are. It's not what's your name or your title, it's who you are. It's not how you feel, it's who you are. Maybe a better way, it's whose you are that determines who you are. 2 Corinthians 12 is where we'll kind of wrap things up for today. It's this story about a guy, and it's not even a story, it's just kind of him sharing his life. He wrote about half of the New Testament. His name is Paul, and Paul's a guy who could do almost anything, and as a result did a lot of things. And he speaks in kind of this randomness at times, or he writes in such randomness. And in 2 Corinthians 12, he starts by saying, I could tell you all the things I've done that would make you impressed with me, but I'm not gonna, which is just a weird statement, because he's kind of saying I'm impressive, but I'm not. And I'm not going to say it, but really you did say it. I don't even understand all that. But he gets to this and said, I'm not going to boast about that, but I'm going to boast in my weaknesses. Well, that's weird. That's a weird statement. And then he gets to this point. Evidently, there was something going on in Paul's life, and we don't know what it was. And we won't even debate it here because we don't have time and we don't have an answer, which is another good reason. That there was something. Lots of times, if you've been around church world or Bible world, they call it Paul's thorn in the flesh. There was something going on with him. It might have been physical. It might have been mental. It might have been outward. It might be inward. I don't know what all that is. A lot of might be's. But whatever it was devastated his life to the point that it affected him every day. It affected his going in and his coming out, his waking up, his going to sleep. It affected his life to the point he says in verse 8, 3 different times, I begged the Lord to take it away. When it says 3 times, 3 is not just a number like, please, please, pretty please. It's not that. 3 times is speaking of seasonal things. Maybe a better way, I asked till I had exhausted my asking. I begged, I pleaded on everything I could muster. I said, God, please take this away, whatever this was. And then there's this statement each time. He said, my grace is sufficient. You know what he said was no. No, he didn't say no. He said, wait. No, he didn't say wait. He said, I got something different. He is exactly where Cain was. Why won't you take? I brought this to you. Is it not good enough? I'm asking, why wouldn't you do it? I often do that. I often pray things and I go, well, God, why wouldn't you? I would serve you better if you gave me that, or if you took that away, or if I didn't have to go through that. And I'm just like, why wouldn't God do that? And I think often God's response to me is, you need to trust me that I know what's best. And my response to him is, this looks so logical to me. Why wouldn't you make her well? Why wouldn't you get me out of that? Why would you take me that way instead of that way? Why would you allow them into my life? His response to Paul, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. When he says my grace is all you need, his grace isn't like something you spoon out, like here's 3 spoonfuls of grace. His grace is just his being enough. What he said is, I want to be your enough. I want to be your completion. I don't want you to feel great about life because of this. I want you to feel great of life because of me. That I will be your enough. You keep running to me and I will meet you there. And I will be enough for you. I will care for you. I will be what you need. What will get you over the top is not one more thing that if I gave you or removed from you, that I am enough. Enough is such a powerful word. When he is your enough, everything else finds its place. It comes back to Cain and Abel. That when he is your identity, when you are identified as his child, as his beloved, as his chosen, when that is your identity, when what defines you is the fact that you are his, that will be your enough. And all of the other things will find their place. It won't always be easy, but they can find a home. But if those are out of place, those things all around you are going to push in and they're going to define you. Read this verse. I read it today in this book. It is at the finish of some of Moses' discussions. And he says these words. He says, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your strength. And you must commit yourself wholeheartedly to these commandments that I'm giving you today. And it sounds like the same thing. You better. But it's not what it's saying, you better or else. It's saying you better so you can. If you will do these things, these are for your best. It's not God saying you'll love me or else. You better love me. I'm lovable. I deserve your love. It's not what he's saying. He's saying you deserve to love me because it's going to help you. If you don't put me where I'm supposed to be, something else is going to take the place and it's going to screw up your life. He's saying, please put me where I need to be so other things don't take that place and mess up your life. And he says this, and maybe this is where we should leave today. He says, talk about them. He says, repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as a reminder. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. And I don't know what you take all that to mean. What I take away, I don't think he cares if you're wearing something on your forehead that says something about that God is your enough. I think what he is saying is that you will not experience what you're intended in life until this piece of identity fits. And this piece of identity just says that God, you are my identifier. I find my hope in you, and nobody else will do. I trust that whatever you have for me is enough. I'm defined by you, and everything else can find its place. That's our prayer for you. Have a great week.